Shaker is known and pats itself on the back for its extraordinary schools, but quantitatively it's not measuring up. I'm concerned that the baccalaureate program minimizes gifted programs and the advanced placement. So 2 questions. One is, what is Shaker doing to challenge the brighter students? And 2, what is Shaker specifically doing to raise these low numbers?
Alex, you begin. And into the microphone, please.
Thank you. Yeah, as you can tell, I'm not that used to the microphone thing. I think that's a good question. I think that if you really look at Shaker's data, Shaker does quite well for our top group of students. And I think the offerings that we have are ones that I would be willing to compare to almost any institution around. I think that our bigger challenge is catching all of our students. And as we catch all of our students, we will see those test scores change and turn around. So I think that the IB program, as it filters through the whole district, is actually going to enhance everybody's education. So I wouldn't look at our test results as something that is impacting necessarily our top end, because when you pull those numbers apart, we do very well in that group.
I would just say, to piggyback off of that the state report card data actually it minimizes what we're doing at the top end and what we're doing with our special needs students and blends it all together. So it doesn't give us an accurate message for where we're excelling and where we really need to work until you dig into the layers of data, which Dr. Hutchins has started to do. And he has done things like dig into the numbers to find out what are the specific areas of performance where we're not delivering as high of test scores as we would like, and start to work with the teachers to map to better results. And a specific example would be graduation rates. What are the things that are inhibiting graduation rates, and how do we change the way we work within the district so that our scores on graduation rates improve? I would also add that there are other metrics that we need to look at beyond the state report card numbers so that we have a better, more well-rounded assessment of what is the nature of our kids in the district, and how are we succeeding, and how does the rest of the world evaluate that success?
Well, I agree with everything the other candidates have already said, but I will add that we looked carefully at the AP program versus the IB program to make sure that they were compatible before we went in the direction of adopting intellectual baccalaureate. We liked IB because it offered us a coherent pre-K through 12 teacher training program, which we thought was not here already, and something that would definitely improve teaching and delivery of curriculum for all of our students. And as proof that AP remains strong, I want to point out that we just announced 140 AP scholars in Shaker. That's 140 students who have already demonstrated to any potential college that they are doing college level work while in high school. Our experience with the IB program is that it appeals to a broad spectrum of students, not just to students who are good at memorizing a lot of challenging material, as the AP program tends to emphasize. IB really teaches our students to think. And I recently had an interesting conversation with someone who's teaching in the new medical training program at the Cleveland Clinic. He said that they are finding they can't bring in students who know how to think. And we talked about the IB program as correcting that kind of training, and he was very interested in what IB is doing at Shaker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have another question from the microphone? And we have one here. Okay, go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. So Linda Lally. We touched on the state report card, and I am interested in time frame, measurement, and accountability. I understand Dr. Hutchins is developing an action plan. What do you consider as board members, what will you consider an acceptable time frame for implementation? When does remedial change have to happen? How will you measure that plan he proposes, and if it's implemented, the success of that plan? And if you feel the plan or the implementation fails, how will you deal with the accountability attached to that?
Amy, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Linda. So from a timeline, I think that was your first question. perspective, there's a couple of different answers to that. In one level, it's already started, and it started on day one of Dr. Hutchins in the district. He's already started to make some important changes to raise the level of instruction and bring some more cohesiveness to teaching and learning within the district. And we're already starting to see some of the fruits of that. I think that the timeline then spreads to more formal training or more formal planning, because in the spring we're going to begin a 5-year strategic planning process, or after the first of the year we'll begin a 5-year strategic planning process. So we need to look at the measurements of some of his initial efforts and the shorter term impact of those, and then we need to use the new 5-year strategic plan as the methodology going forward. The metrics on whether or not we're successful. In the near term, his 90-day action plan was much more about activities that he will do because he believes that the impact they will have. Sorry.
Annette?
Okay, sometimes it does take many months for the full impact to be measurable in student outcomes. But let me just list for you some of the immediate changes that Dr. Hutchins has already initiated. He's working on full IB implementation because we haven't gotten there yet for grades 6 through, but arguably 10. So the middle year program is starting up now. We're adding more foreign language instruction. We have new practices for early intervention to try to prevent failing students from being able to continue in a failing status for months at a time. Amy already mentioned a couple of things I have on my list. We have new advisory committees for students and for neighborhood and community leaders to be interacting with our superintendent. We have a careful reexamination of staffing needs and assignments in every building. We have a renewed focus on teaching quality and coaching our teachers. I think all of those will have measurable impact
Thank you.
soon.
Yeah. All right, we have a question here. What is your view as to the appropriate target cycle for... And so, I'm sorry, I didn't go around. You're right.
I'll be quick, because I would agree with both comments. I would add in terms of the time frame that we need to remember that these are our kids, and that there needs to be an urgency to connect to every single one of them. So that our time frame needs to be as soon as we can for those kids that we aren't reaching effectively. It also will help our entire district. But I think we can build from the strengths in doing that. You also asked about accountability, and I would add that, the board's job, primary job, is hiring the right person to be superintendent and evaluating that person. And if they don't meet the metrics that the board and the superintendent sets, then it's the board's job to evaluate and address that. And it's the public's job to tell the board if they're doing a good job or not.
Okay, we've done the round. I do give a chance now to ask a written question from the audience. What is your view as to the appropriate target cycle for frequency and amount of operating levies for the district? And Annette, we'll start with you.
This is something we spend an awful lot of time worrying about. Everybody on the board is a homeowner in Shaker Heights. We are very aware of the amounts, the number of times that we read in the paper that we're the highest tax district in Ohio. We're very aware of the tax burdens on our citizens. We are also very aware that our citizens have extremely high expectations for what they want from our schools. Pattern with the past levies is, for many years we were on a cycle of an operating levy about every 3 years. And the last 2 levies, this board has stretched for at least 4 years. We are hoping to continue to do that, stretching out the levies so that they are less frequent. We're also anticipating that the next levy will be lower than previous levies, which have been 9.9 mils. We're looking at lower numbers. We're not sure yet which number will be most practical. Despite any new levy in the last couple of cycles, we have had to make cuts. We are making cuts to our ongoing costs, and we are trimming.
Okay, thank you. And go ahead, Alex, your turn.
I think the short answer to that is that all of us would like them to be as few and far between as possible. but we still need to have our schools well-funded with the needs met of our students. And that this board has started an important process in terms of digging into the budget in detail. And I think that as we get more into that, that then feeds the process. There is no doubt that if there's an option of delaying the levy or reducing the size of the levy, that that would be a positive thing, but not at the expense of the core education.
I want to start by saying that we have a finance and audit committee that meets approximately monthly. The meetings are on the school district's website, and we would love to see all of you at those meetings. We have a few committee members in the audience today and a few frequent meeting attendees in the audience today who in some ways were probably better prepared to answer this question than anybody. But what I would say is, first and foremost, the question shouldn't be what's the right frequency of levies. The question should be, how do we run the district as cost effectively as possible? And what are all the ways that we can look for revenue to support the running of the district? So first question, how do we deliver the level of quality that we need, but as cost effectively as possible? Second question, what are creative places where we can find revenue so we don't have to burden our taxpayers more? And then thirdly, what can we do to further minimize the tax burden? We absolutely have to continue to make every effort to reduce cost, maintain or improve the quality of our education, and extend the levy cycles as far as humanly possible.
Okay. Do we have anyone at the microphone?
Hi, my name is Bradley Krutoff. I'm from the Gathering Center for seniors in high school. As AP students, we feel that, as AP students who have taken multiple AP tests this summer, we feel that this traditional track of learning has been put aside as a priority due to IB.
We're going to need to ask you to speak right into the microphone and a little more slowly.
As AP students who have been taking multiple AP tests this summer, we feel that this traditional track of learning has been put aside as a priority due to IB. Due to IB taking over the courtyard and practicing yoga this past year, some students are questioning its credibility. They have priority with class scheduling, which results in other students having to make difficult decisions about which classes to take due to spots being filled and scheduling conflicts. Is IB that much more of a priority than AP?
Could you go ahead, Alex?
Can I try to summarize at the end? Is IB a higher priority than AP? Was that the nugget of it? Not being on the school board when this was brought in, I wasn't part of those discussions, but my understanding and belief and reflection from listening is that the two are really meant to be complementary, that the goal is to have options and to have the ability for them both to work effectively. I think it is very important for students and members of the school community to speak up and share their experiences, because none of us are in the classrooms. So I know for me it's very helpful to hear from you and appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, I want to echo a big piece of that. One thing is, not being in a classroom every day as a student, we have no idea what it's like to make choices between IB and AP and what the other challenges and frustrations you face are. It's meaningful to me that you asked the question, and it's meaningful that there was so much applause in support of it. That tells me that this is definitely something that we need to take back to Dr. Hutchins and discuss in more detail and get a better understanding of. I, just like Alex, was not on the board when IB was brought to the district, but definitely my understanding is that the two are to be compatible, and that IB is more of a framework for how to think about education, and that AP is more specific coursework. And that part of the goal of IB, like Annette said earlier, is to build a philosophy of critical thinking and exploration throughout the entire years in school. But all I can tell you right now is we don't want to put our students in that kind of frustrating position of having to choose. We do want to make sure there's high quality choices for everyone, and we need to dig into this and understand a little bit more to better answer your questions.
Thank you.
It's tough to add to those excellent answers, but I will just say that at no point did the board make any decision about priority between AP and IB. It was always supposed to be coexistent and complementary to each other. And I think that the fact that our superintendent has formed a student advisory committee should be helpful in this regard to bring this kind of issue and any other issues that come to students' attention directly to the attention of the superintendent.
Okay. Question?
My name is Doug Wang. I'm father of 4 Shaker kids, 3 that have graduated. Recently I started tutoring in the high school because I had some spare time. And granted it's a small sample size, but I've always felt that Shakers, the thing that makes Shaker great are the people in Shaker. And I've noticed that with the students. But what I do see is these are great students, but they don't always have the resources that they need. And I don't really think it's up to the school to provide all that, because I would suspect that there are plenty of kids who are receiving outside tutoring.
Finish your question.
My question is, how do you engage the people in the residents rather than all of us just saying, well, what are you going to do for us? How do you get us more engaged?
Okay, and Amy will go first this time.
I think that's a really good question, and I want you to know, if you haven't seen it already, that's been a high priority for the board, at least for the last year, and I believe even before I joined the board that was already a strong area of focus. And I hope you saw it in the superintendent search, and it is most definitely a high priority for Dr. Hutchins. We have to find ways to engage the community, and that means having forums like this so people can come to us, but it also means going out into the community and meeting directly with people where they are and listening to them and understanding their concerns and looking for ways to bring them in to help us solve those challenges. You saw us do it through the superintendent search, between having community sessions to invite broad groups of community members. We had small groups of people representing the entire diversity of the community meeting with our search consultants. We did the online survey. We have to do more and more and more of those kinds of things as a board, as the administration, and we have to encourage our teachers to do that as well.
It's interesting that the IB project actually requires us to reach out for volunteers and mentors in the community. And so one of the pieces of IB implementation is that our administrators have been putting together a database of volunteers in the community, such as yourself, and I want to thank you very much for tutoring at the high school. That database is almost up and running. It has been facilitated by PTO units in each of the buildings, but that's just the start. Certainly we could be doing more. We've talked, in fact, about trying to reach out for recycled computers. There are a number of ways that we could engage the time and resources of our community members, and Amy mentioned several starts at that this board is engaged in, and we will continue to be reaching out and look forward to your suggestions as how we could do it.
I would just add to those comments briefly that I think another component of this is that we need to remember that not everybody in our community is comfortable walking into our school buildings, and that we need to instill a culture where everybody is welcome. You get one chance at the first impression, and if someone comes into the building and is put off in any way, they likely won't be back. So we need to work on that, and as a culture, we as a board need to do some of it, but as a district, we need to instill that culture. I also think it's very important that we remember that we've got these kids in our schools for a set number of hours, and that we need to do everything we can to make sure that we are giving them the resources, because some of them aren't going to get those resources outside.
So I can't tell who's leaving, who's coming to the microphone. Okay, go ahead. Yes, sir.
I've already asked a question. I'm Leo Eisen. And the most important thing for an early elementary school student is to learn to read. And how is teaching the critical thinking skills championed by the International Baccalaureate program, how is it necessary or even possible when 3rd, 4th, or even 5th graders cannot read?
Let's see, we'll go with Annette.
Well, it's not necessary to be able to read to answer a question in the classroom, and IB certainly emphasizes interactive teaching. And I was one of the interesting things that our new superintendent is doing is asking board members to accompany him on what he calls a building scan where he goes classroom to classroom for 3 to 5 minutes at a piece and observes the teacher. And among other things that he's looking for is how is IB being implemented. So I've been with him in 3 different buildings, and I've watched the teachers interacting, and I shouldn't say never, but usually I'm not aware of whether the student is reading or not. There's interaction and there's learning happening. So I don't think it's necessary, but setting that aside, it is essential that every student read, and they have to learn to read as soon as possible. And I think that we're doing more than ever with our grades K through 3, especially, to make sure that no child proceeds from grade 3 without being a good reader who can read to learn.
I think that's an excellent question. Obviously, reading is a foundational skill, and if you don't get it, it's going to be hard to build from there. My hope is that IB, and so speaking to how IB can interrelate to that, if IB makes it more interesting, if IB makes what you're doing more engaging, the hope is, as a student, you're more interested in reading. And that's a critical component. If you want to do it, you're more likely to achieve it. So in an ideal world, IB will actually, just by enhancing the instruction within the classroom in those K through 4 buildings, is going to help us engage more kids. The more kids are engaged, the more they're going to learn.
Yeah, I think the thing I would add is that having watched my daughter through kindergarten all the way up through 3rd grade now in Fernway, which she's only officially been in the IB program recently, but a lot of that language has been trickling through for a while. The way that you learn critical thinking skills in an early elementary setting is you're taught to be inquisitive and you're taught to explore. And those things are also important precursors to learning to read. One piece of it is it increases your vocabulary, and the vocabulary that a child has is a direct correlation to their ability to read, because part of what you learn to do initially is predict what the words are, because you know what the word should be, and as you're reading, you're drawing from your own vocabulary to help. So there's a lot more science than you might think behind how IB is broken down all the way through to the kindergarten level, so that it is complementary to the educational goals, including learning to read.
Hi, Deborah Hagler, Shaker Heights Chamber of Commerce. I actually have 2 questions, and I'll start with the first one, which is, please tell me your position on the common practice in Shaker Heights School District of rehiring retired teachers. I've stated my position in writing before that I personally feel that we need younger educational stock, and that the mature stock may not be able, especially in cases of coaches and physical ed, to keep up with the younger students.
Let's go with the first question, and then we can come back.
Okay.
Let's see. Alex?
I think obviously the retire, rehire question has come up a fair amount. I've gotten to sit and watch board members address this a fair amount, and I think it's a really good question. I think people have raised very real concerns with it. I think there are a lot of complicated factors on the financial side of it that is not quite as straightforward as that one-to-one, oh, we can save money. But I think we do need to have a clear and standard process for when we would do that, when we wouldn't do it. And the key thing, and the most important thing in this entire endeavor, is to get the best people in the classroom. And that's whether they're young, whether they're old, wherever they are, we need the best people, because none of the rest of this is going to matter as much as having the best faculty who are the most engaged with the kids that we have here now that we can get. So that would be my first priority, but we're also in a tight budget.
There are lots of opinions about what makes a good teacher. And one of the things that I'm really excited about with Dr. Hutchings is through his use of data and all of the decisions that he makes at the district, and through his standards for what high quality instructional methods look like within a district, he is helping us bring an even greater level of sophistication to how we as a district define what a good teacher is. And that will be an ongoing process that also includes work with the state evaluation standards that we have to incorporate, and some of the exciting things that our teachers union are doing from a peer evaluation standpoint to help us make sure we have the best teachers. And sometimes what you find is that the most effective capabilities don't come in the packages that you expect them to be in. So one of the things that I hope that this community dialogue about retire or rehire will help us do is start to establish a more consistent and data-based description for what a good teacher is and why we want good teachers at Shaker Heights.
Okay, leaving me to provide some of the stock answers that the board always provides to this question. Very eloquent responses from my comrades up here. Retire rehire is only done on a selective basis. We are, however, reviewing with our new superintendent whether we have been as selective as we need to be. Any rehired teacher comes in at a lower salary scale, so there are some savings there. People have to remember that we cannot force teachers to retire, so teachers can stay on as long as they want to at the top salary number because of tenure laws. So there are a number of reasons why retire rehire is more economical than you might assume. And following up on what Amy said about what teacher quality looks like or where we find it and what packages we find it, a recent building scan with the superintendent, the teacher that he was most excited about watching in the classroom happened to be a retire rehire. He didn't know that. I told him that as we left the room, and he was enthusiastic about her performance.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Ezra Zygmunt. I'm a senior at the high school and a national AP scholar, and I would like to reiterate concerns that my peers have raised about the baccalaureate program. I think I would specifically like to challenge the assertion that AP and IB can coexist, and I think the problem comes in grade inflation and grade non-equivalence. From 2002 to 2012, the number of seniors at the high school with the GPA over 4.0 has doubled to nearly 25% of the class. And so my concern is that students are not receiving grades that fairly reflect their ability and their talent. I think that grades are being given on the same scale that do not compare equal difficulties of classes.
Can you go with a question?
Yeah, so my question is, what are your specific plans to make sure that grades are a fair reflection of student performance?
So I want to again say thank you for the question. Thank you for shedding light on a concern that I had no awareness of before I walked in this room. And thank you for the echoes of support that lets me know that this is something that we should pay attention to. I can't tell you that I have specific plans for how to make sure that grade inflation does not occur, since I didn't know that it was a problem for tonight. I can tell you that you are right to be concerned. If it is a problem, we need to understand that, and we need to work with Dr. Hutchins and with the faculty to make sure that we have consistent standards for all of our students. Because what our goal is for all of our students to learn to their fullest potential, not to inflate grades to make it feel like we're all doing great when we're not really then prepared to succeed in life or in further study. So thank you for informing us.
I'll echo that. I'll just point out, however, that AP tests and IB exams are graded by national scorers. They are not graded by anybody in the district. We have a phenomenal track record with those assessments for our students. So it's within the realm of possibility that the students truly are performing at a higher level. And but we need to look very carefully at what percentage of our students truly are worthy of being on the dean's list and that kind of award.
We're going to start sounding very repetitive up here. I would echo those thoughts, and I think that is an issue. It's actually, ironically, something I was talking to Dr. Hutchins about today in middle school context. I think that we try very hard to engage students, and we try very hard to do the best for our students, but I think that the best we can do is give them an honest reflection, give them best education, encourage them to be engaged, and give them an honest reflection of how well they know the topic that's being studied. That would be mine.
All right, and this will be our last question, except we have two people. Go ahead. Sir, go ahead, and if we get quick answers, we may be able to let them know.
My name is Craig Stout, Shaker grad, Shaker dad. We have recently, the district is a relationship now with Huntington Bank that has developed a lot of significant donations for both the district and the school foundation. I'm curious about your thoughts of expanding corporate sponsorship as a way of relieving some of the financial pressure, or are we turning schools into Times Square?
Lynn, and that you'll start with.
I'm in favor of pursuing corporate sponsorships with some caveats. I'm very concerned about the way in which any particular corporate relationship would reflect upon the impartiality of our business people, upon the values that we want our students to live and express. And so therefore I would just want to weigh each particular opportunity very carefully and make sure that we're making moral as well as financial decisions that benefit the entire district. But I'm all in favor of pursuing additional corporate sponsorships.
I think we have an obligation to look at every possible revenue stream that we can, and corporate sponsorships would be among those. I would say that in coaching kids' soccer teams and going to other schools and other districts, I have been very struck that Shaker's fields are not surrounded by corporate logos. And it is a different feel. And I am guessing that the Shaker community wouldn't want that. So I think we should explore every possible avenue, and I think we need to remember that we also need to keep the character that makes us different than other places.
Amy?
I would suggest that we need to think more about corporate partnerships than corporate sponsorships, and I would expect that some of those partnerships would come with funding from employers, not only in our community but in nearby communities. If we can find ways to get employers engaged in the district, working with our kids, mentoring our kids, helping to provide career education for our kids, then they will create internship opportunities, part-time job opportunities, and other opportunities that are really good for all of our students, and potentially create opportunities for us to cultivate additional financial support for the kinds of programs that are important to us, especially in these times of financial cutbacks. I think the other thing to know is that, and this goes to part of the question about accountability earlier, one of the components that we've included in Dr. Hutchins' evaluation criteria is that he helps us identify an extra $1 million in revenue from new sources throughout calendar year next year.
Okay, and we're going to let you go with a quick question, and our final round will be another 30-second turn.
My name is Catherine Friedel. I'm a 1963 graduate of the high school. So I had my 50th high school reunion this summer. I hadn't been back to the high school since my children left there in the 90s. So there were about 20 or 25 of us from my high school class who showed up on a Saturday morning to have a tour of the high school. And I know bricks and mortar isn't a big deal and we want to talk about the students, but I was really impressed with the facility. And I hadn't been back there, since, the mid-90s. And I thought, this is a great PR thing for the schools to use to get people like me. I've turned my attention away from the schools. I always will support them just blindly. But, how many people like me have shown up today?
Okay, your question?
My next door neighbor hasn't. So I would like, it's not a question, I'd like you to find a way to engage people like me, to come see what the buildings are like even. Because you want us to vote for the levies. So show us, what you've done and, how great the facilities are for the kids.
Okay, let's go over that. Let's finish up with We'll let Alex see if he wants to say anything quickly on that.
I think that's a great point. I also think that one of the things that is true for Shaker is that if we get people who are looking at schools to come into our buildings and look at what's going on in our buildings, they like it. But we have to get them to come in. And we have to acknowledge that being at the bottom of the list in the plain dealer registry isn't helping us. So we've got to build that outreach, and some of it is providing more information and providing more invitations, and part of it is raising our results.
We're going to go real quick.
So first and foremost, I'd like to invite you to join some of the other audience members and volunteer at the high school to mentor some students as a way to get more involved. And I think we should do more proactive outreach. I think it's a great idea. The other thing I'll just say really quickly is our buildings are some of the cleanest school buildings I've ever seen in my life. They are so well maintained and taken care of, and I can't say that enough. And our custodial staff deserves a lot of credit for what they do to help keeping our buildings looking good and in good repair.
Okay, we use volunteers in almost every level, so you don't have to be a financial analyst who's retired and tutoring in high school. If you can read, you can volunteer in the Shaker Schools, and we welcome you. In addition, we have an open house for everybody in the community to come in Monday of next week. It's Tour Your Schools Day. Anybody can come to any of our school buildings, sit in on classes, walk around the halls, and you will see that our buildings are very well maintained. Our children do know how to behave, and we haven't changed lockers since you graduated from the high school in 1950, whatever. So those are opportunities.